Hello, on this video I'm going to show you how to create a database and also how to create a table, and after that I'm going to create a primary key and auto increments for the primary key. I'm going to be using Microsoft SQL and SQL Server Management Studio for that. So let's open the SSMS and start creating things. Alright, so here's my SSMS. And I don't have any database for now, so I'm going to create one. So right click on databases, new database, and then just give it a name. I'm going to call this the school database and just click OK. And now I have the school database right here. I'm going to expand, and then I'm going to expand on tables, and I have no tables, so I'm going to create a table. Right click, new table. And this is going to be a table to store student data. So I'm going to put here the name of the student and then a varchar 50 for the name of the student. This is the data type. I'm going to also put here a maybe address. Also varchar 50 and maybe a phone number. Also varchar 50. Now I'm going to have only 3 columns, but you should have a lot more than 3. You should have the first name, last name, middle name, the address, the city, the number, the apartment number, phone number, email, social security number, and everything else that's used to store the data for a given person. But for learning purpose, I'm just going to have 3 columns here just for simplicity and just for learning purpose. So I'm going to click on save, and now I'm going to name this the students table. Click OK, and now I have a student table. So I'm going to close the designer, and then if I look right here in the table did not show up. So I'm going to click on refresh, and now the table is right here. If I want to go back to the design, I'm going to right click and click on design, and then here you can modify the table. So I'm going to close the design, and next I'm going to do a right click and then edit top 200 rows. So what that does, it lets me edit or change these rows without writing any code for that. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then after that, let's actually write some code to do that. But don't worry, the code for that is crazy simple. So for name, I'm going to have Jane. The address is 123 Cool Streets. And Jane's phone number is some number. Now, if you look here, you're going to see that there is a red warning sign. And that means the data is not saved in a database yet. So I have to press enter, and then the data goes to the database. So now it's saved. I'm going to enter one more row here. So Joe, and then right after the Joe, I want to press enter. So once I press enter, this row got saved. But if you notice that the row has null and null, this table allows me to have no data in certain columns. The reason it does that is because I did not uncheck here on the allow nulls. So if I uncheck this and then save and then try to save, it's going to give me a problem here because some rows do have null. Therefore, this cannot be changed. But if I get all my rows and put some data, now it will let me change. So I'm going to come back here to the design, click on save, and it saves. Now it might be the case that it will not let you save the data. If that's your case, go to tools, then options, then designer, table, and database design, and uncheck this setting right here. So prevent saving changes, uncheck this. Click OK, and that should let you save your changes. All right, so we know now how to insert some data using the edit top 200 rows. So I'm going to go back to the table, right click, and then script table as select to new query editor. What that does is open a editor for me that I can actually write code for that. So SSMS wrote this code for me, and I like to have it in one row just to keep more organized. So select the things that I want from the table. So this is the code that we're interested on. This one here we can delete, and this one here we can delete as well. So this is the query we're interested. So at this moment we are doing a select statement. So select is give this stuff to me. And the stuff that you want is you want the name, the address, and the phone. So those are the columns from our table. And then the from is the table that you want this from. So in this case, it's the student table. Now there's a DBO here. This is not mandatory, so I can delete. And the other thing that's not mandatory is the brackets. The brackets are not mandatory if the words are not confusing for SSMS. Some words are confusing. For example, if you write a column called select, so select is a reserved word, but you can still create a table with the name select. So if your column is confusing, you do need to put the column in brackets. But if not, then not really needed. And now to run this query, I want to click on executes right here on the top, and then executes for me and I get the data. Now the shortcut for that is just to press the function 5 or F5 key in your keyboard. So I prefer that. So press the F5 and then you run the query. Now we can simplify this even further. So instead of saying, hey, give me the address, phone, and name, I can just put a star right here. And the star says, give me everything from the student table. So if I run this code now, it runs just as fine. Or if you do not want everything, you can choose to have only, let's say, the address and the phone. So I'm going to run this and look right here on the results. Now you see that only address and phone showed up, and I can also remove the phone if I want to, and now I'm selecting only one column. So only one column got selected. All right, so now I'm going to do another thing here. I'm going to do a right click and then script table as, and I'm going to click this time insert to new query editor. Now this is a little bit more complicated query, but it's quite easy to understand. So the first part of the query is insert into, and here I have where I'm going to insert. So this is the table name, and then these are the column names that I want to insert the data into. Then I have the values. Then after that, within single quotes, I'm going to put the values that I want to insert. So for example, the first column is the column name. So I'm going to put here Mary. The second column is address. So I'm going to put Seattle Street for address. And then finally the phone number is going to be this number. So the sequence matters. So the first column here is name, so the first value has to be name. The second column is address, therefore the second value must be address, and so on. So the sequence matters. And I'm going to press F5 to run this query, and it tells me here, hey, one row affected. I'm going to go back to the other query, and then I'm going to run this query here again. So this query now has 2 rows, but if I run again, now I get my third row. Now, one thing that I don't like is to keep on going back and forth in query. So because of that, you can copy a query and you can run more than one query at the same time. So in this case here, I'm running two queries, one query to insert and one query to select. All right, so I'm gonna run this again. So I'm just gonna press F5 and everything runs again. Now, when I have multiple SQL statements, I can choose to run one of them only. So one thing you can do is comment it out. All you have to do is put 2 dashes and that commented out this row. So now if I change this to Bellevue Street and run again, now only the insert got executed. The select did not get executed. So I'm gonna uncomment it out. And now if I wanna run only the select, I can comment it out this line here by putting dash dash, or I can select the command that I wanna run and then press F5. So I'm gonna press F5 and only this query right here in the bottom got executed. So again, 2 ways for you to execute one query only when you have multiple queries. One is to comment it out, the other one is just to highlight and then press F5 and then only that command gets executed. Now, if you highlight only parts of it, it will not run the whole thing. It will run only the parts that you highlighted. In this case here, it will be an error because it's a malformed SQL statement. You're missing one column right here. So this is a fail, but if you highlight the whole thing, run, everything runs. All right, so now we have all this data and I'm gonna select everything from the student and run this code. And then we have a problem right here. The problem is that this table does not have what's called a primary key. A primary key is a column that we insert inside the table, and that column will have unique values for each row of the table. So right now, some of these rows do not have a unique identifier. In order for you to do a lot of these SQL operations, including a select or a delete or update, and also doing primary key and foreign key with a second table, and I'm gonna make a video specifically for that. But for now, I'm just gonna work with one table, and therefore there will be no foreign key. But the next video, I'm gonna make a second table for foreign key. All right, so you need a primary key for a lot of more complex operations. So I'm gonna create a primary key for this table here. So I'm gonna go to the student table, right click and open the design. And right here, I'm gonna create a column called ID. And the ID is going to be of int type. And then I'm gonna save this. So at this point on the video, I forgot to right click on ID and then set it as a primary key. So because of that, I'm soon gonna find out, and then I'll come back and fix it on the video. And now if I go back to my query, I'm gonna select everything, and now I have a bunch of null values right here. So a primary key should never, ever, ever have a null value because it defies the purpose. The whole purpose of having a primary key is to have a unique value on this column. If you allow null values, that means there will be repeated values. So this thing here defies the purpose of primary key. So because of that, the primary key cannot be null. But then we have a problem now, and the problem is that all the rows that we created previously do have null values. So if I try to save, it will not let me save. So because of that, do never create a table without a primary key. Now, if you did something stupid, like creating a table without a primary key, your solution is to create a backup table or script this table here to get all the data out, then create a new table with your primary ID and then insert the values there. I'm not going to show you how to do that. Instead, I'm just going to drop everything from the student table and then we're going to insert new data. So right here on this query, I'm going to create a command here to delete everything from students. And the command is delete from students. So I'm going to highlight or select this row, press F5, and all the data from that table got deleted. So now I'm going to comment it out, and then I want to run the select just to make sure it's empty, and in fact it is empty. So now I'm going to go back to the design, and now I can save this, and this modification got saved. Now, there is one more step that we want to do here, but before I do this step, which is auto increments, I want to show you why it's very convenient to have the auto increments. So, if I want to insert something now on the student table, this query is not going to work because now I have a ID table. So I'm going to run this just to show you that it fails because it's missing the ID. So right here at the ends, I'm going to put a comma and then ID. And now I need to put the value of the ID that I want to go to the table. So I'm going to pass ID 10, for example. And now I'm going to select this and I'm going to run. And then I know the one table got affected. Select this command, run. And here you can see that one row got inserted and the ID is 10. Now, I'm going to change this to Joe. And then Joe is going to live in LA and some other phone number. But I'm going to leave the number 10 here. Even though I only have an ID 10 here, I'm going to leave it here just to show you what happened. So I'm going to run this query. And this is the part on the video that I found out the problem. And I'm going to go back and fix it just by setting the ID as a primary key. And it let me insert when it should not have let me insert. It should be fail. So that means I made a mistake somewhere and I think I know where I made the mistake. So let me go back to the design. Yep. So I forgot to set the ID as a primary key. So I'm going to right click right here on ID and set as primary key. Now it's not going to let me save because I have two keys that are identical. So there it is, I have a mistake. So because of that, I'm going to go to the query and I'm going to delete from student where ID equals 10. So I'm going to highlight this row, run, and then everything that has ID equals 10 gets deleted, which means I have no data in the database anymore. So now I can go to the design and save this table. All right, so save this table, and now I can come to my query and insert some values. So I'm going to insert value 10 again. And then I'm going to try to run the same query again. And hopefully this time it's going to fail because ID is now a primary key. So I'm going to run and it fails. It fails and it gives me a message right here. And the message says, cannot insert duplicate key inside the student table and the duplicate key is 10. So because this column is a primary key, there can never ever be any repeated data inside this column. So you can insert this again as long as you have a different number. So I'm going to put number 100 here instead, run, and now I have two records. However, the ID is different. There is one more thing that I like to do on the tables, and that is to create a auto increments for this table here. So I'm gonna right click, then properties, and right here on table design, identity column, I'm gonna put ID as identity column, and then I'm gonna save this table. Now I'm gonna go back to my query, and I'm gonna run this query again. So I'm gonna pass number 20 now. So notice that there is no 20 here. There is no ID 20. So this should let me insert, but it doesn't, because the ID column now is identity. So that means it's an auto increment. And because it's an auto increment, you don't do anything. You don't insert anything. So if your ID is auto increments, you can remove any inserts that you do on the ID. Now you just insert the row, and then the ID is auto-generated for you. So I'm gonna select only the student for now. So I'm gonna run this query only. And now I'm gonna run the entire thing. I'm gonna run both the inserts and the select at the same time. So I'm just gonna press F5. If you notice right here, it created another row for me, but now with the ID 101. And if I run this again, 102, run again, 103, run again, 104, and so on. So the whole point here is that always creates a primary key and always sets that as identity, so it can do an auto increment for you. And by having the primary key, it allows you to target a specific row on the database. So let's say if I want to delete only this row here in the database, in other words, only the one with ID 101. So if I want to delete that, I'll write a delete statement like this: deletes from student where ID equals 101. So these commands will delete only this row right here. So I'm gonna run this program, and now you can see that the row with ID 101 is now deleted. So the whole point here is that primary key is crazy important for your database, both in terms of letting you run query against specific rows of your table, and also it allows you to do primary key and foreign key with other tables. But that's a topic for the next video. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.